to talk about 8 ways to ensure your no-regerts hire. Some of you have very kindly written me and let me know that there's a typo in our title, that it is a no-regrets hire. And indeed, you are correct and incorrect at the same time. We're referring to that tattoo that you may have seen memes of, the no-regerts, where yeah, if you were to misspell a tattoo, I think that might be something that you would regret. And similarly, when you hire the wrong person for whatever reason, they don't have the capabilities that you were expecting. They're not. They don't share the values that you have. They maybe don't have the kind of emotional intelligence that it takes to do the work that you do and to maintain the kind of relationships that you want to maintain with the clients. It's hard to unwind that stuff. Even if you end up letting that person go, sometimes the damage is done. And so I'm thrilled to have my friend Jen Lambert on this 8 ways with me, to talk about how to prevent that no-regerts hire. Jen, welcome.
Hello. I love I love this topic. I know we talked about the tattoo and would everybody get it? Hopefully everybody is remembering that same meme that we've seen. No regrets.
Jen, take a moment, please, and introduce yourself to the good folks at home.
I'd be happy to. I'm Jennifer Lambert. My title is Chief Strategy Officer for Terrace Staffing Group. We are headquartered out of Seattle, Washington, but we're spread across 10 states across the country, focused on recruiting and staffing. It's really excited. We're just celebrating being named again to the Best of Staffing list for 2024 based on customer satisfaction and place talent satisfaction. So placing people and connecting employers and talent is what we do all day, every day, and we love it.
Tremendous. And so I imagine you're helping people avoid the no-regerts hire.
Right. Well, if they have regrets, then they have regrets about working with us. So we very much have a motivation to make sure that you have no regret when you hire with us.
Yeah. Well, I am excited for this conversation because I have enjoyed every single one of our conversations. And and I'm excited for me because I'm going to learn a lot, and I'm excited for the folks at home because I imagine they are going to learn a lot as well. Let's jump right in at this point. You're going to have 4 suggestions for people about how to make that hire a no regrets hire, somebody that you can be glad that you've hired, not only through the first day and first week, but through the first year and first decade. So,
I hope you celebrate many work anniversaries with that hire.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, what is your first suggestion for the folks about how to ensure that they're not going to have regrets?
Okay, HR folks, you're going to hate this, but shred the job description. My favorite call is from a client who says, we need to hire somebody, but we're not ready to talk about it yet because we don't have the job description written. And I'm like, no, this is the perfect time to talk about it, because oftentimes that job description, I know there's reasons to have job descriptions. I don't literally mean not to have job descriptions, but a job description makes, in my experience, a pretty poor starting place for making that hire, because the job description doesn't really tell the whole story or build the roadmap of what you should be looking for in making that hire. And so there's a process that we advocate for called outcome-based hiring, where instead of just starting from skills and credentials and 3 years of this and 5 years of that, we're talking about what are the actual tangible, measurable things that this person in this position needs to be able to produce to justify you paying them, right? I mean, no client ever comes to us saying we need to hire because we just want more people around this place. They want to make a hire because they need a business result. And so it's starting with that business result in mind and then working backwards from that, reverse engineering to do that, to deliver that result. What will they need to do day in, day out in order to believe that they can do those things day in, day out? What should they have done in the past that would lead us to believe that they could do that again? And then really challenging, like, why 3 years, why 5 years, why a degree? Do any of those things actually help us get toward that outcome? So job descriptions are, in my experience, completely useless in making a great hire.
One of the things that I love about that, and there are many, but one of the things that I love about that, Jen, is that if you are from the get-go asking, what do we actually need to accomplish by having this person on board?
Right.
That's also going to be a really valuable management tool. Okay,
Go
like
figure. Go figure.
now that you're here, it's not just about doing these tasks that are in your job description or having these qualifications. It's
Right.
about you accomplishing these outcomes. So one of the great questions that a job applicant can ask is, what's success going to look like for me in the first
Right.
3 months, the first 6 months?
And that's the point I was just going to
There-
make relative to your comment is the best applicants want to know this too, right?
yes.
And I just
Mhm.
spoke with somebody who's 1 week into a new hire with us. He's an internal employee, a director level role. And, he's like, yeah, week 1, I can see where I can make an impact here. I can see how I can move the needle. And the reason he was excited about the job, he's like, honestly, your job posting didn't look that different than other jobs I was also looking at because I've done this before, right? But what was different about our job posting is that it called out like, this is why we want this is why we're
Mhm.
hiring for this position. Here's the impact that you can make, the tangible results that you would deliver to the business. And he wanted that. Yeah, your best
And so
applicants want that too.
And so not only did they end up with a no regrets hire, they ended up with a no regrets, we made a job offer and he didn't take it. So they helped secure the deal.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, anything more you want to say about this shred the job description?
I mean, okay, I'm
Aside from
sneaking
the
in.
fact
I'm
that
sneaking in a 1.2 on my 4 suggestions because the exact opposite of the job description is having no plan at all. And
uh,
so I'm not saying shred the job description and wing it.
yes.
Too many hiring managers trust their gut, or it's like we'll know it when we see it. They're
Mhm.
our kind of person. Um, no, even those soft skills should map back to the result you're looking for,
I
right?
love
I
it.
mean, I've seen this happen where, like, maybe we tend to be, we're a sales organization, but not every position in our company is a selling position. So do
Yeah.
I need somebody with a firm handshake and good eye contact to work in my payroll department? Maybe not. Or like, am I missing out on good people because I'm overextending a soft skill that is really, really important to deliver a business result in one part of my business and extrapolating that and saying that in order to work here, you have to have a big personality and be, outgoing and
Yeah.
make, connections easily with strangers. Why?
A- And
To
so I'm
accurately
seeing
process payroll? Probably not.
al-
I mean, it's
I'm
a
seeing
bonus,
also
right? But I would rule out good people if I thought that way.
no kidding. And I'm seeing also that if you're starting with the outcome, right? This is the outcome that we need. And in order to get that outcome, they're going to need to have these qualities or these skills or
Right.
this history. Uh, you could also say, what are the things that would sabotage that? And let's make sure to select that out.
Yeah, good point. I love it. Yeah, that's a good point.
All
I'm
right.
making a note. I knew I'd learn something today too. That's
All
awesome.
right. Yeah, we're both already learning.
Yeah.
Should we quit now while we're ahead?
Right. If nobody else gets anything out of this, you and I are learning. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. My first suggestion for the no regrets hire: decide in advance, together as a team or as a leader, however you make this decision. Make the decision in advance. What is the process by which we are going to make this decision? One of the things that I find creates the most conflict in an organization about whom do we hire? Do we make the job offer to this person or that person, or have we not yet seen the person? What is the process? Not only the criteria, but also the process by which we are going to make this decision. Decide that before you post your job offer.
100% agree. 100% agree. This is one of the things that we see in hiring processes. You'll hear a hiring manager say, I'm not sure. We need more time to think about it.
Mhm.
More time does not make a better process. What are you doing with that time? Now, I'm not saying
Yeah,
that you should rush, but
right.
just having more time doesn't lead to better decisions. And to your point, how are you going to make a decision? Maybe you need more time because you need to have another conversation, or you need to check a reference, or you need to
Mhm.
put them through some work sample. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But just more time
We don't need
doesn't,
more time to think about it.
mm-mm. You may need more
With
data points, but you don't need more time.
Yeah. All right. Um, one other thing just one other thing that I'll say about this is that, um, the process also includes the people, right? Is this going to be a democratic process? Is this going to be advisors and one decision maker? Is this going to be everybody has to say yes, anybody can veto, right? The mechanisms have to be in place if you want this to go well.
There's so many things I could say about that. One of my pet peeves is people being involved in hiring decisions who don't actually have a voice. So
Mm.
I agree with you 100%. If everybody gets a vote, which I don't think is probably the right way to make most hiring decisions, again, go back to your outcome based, right? Like if there's 4 people who have to work directly with this person, maybe those 4 people should have a say, right? But there should be
Conceivably.
clarity about why people are involved in a process, and does
Yes.
it lead to a better outcome? And if they don't have a voice, then why are you involving them in the process?
Yes. And what
That's super
specifically?
dishonoring to the people that you're asking to be part of the process. I've been there. I've made that mistake, right? Where the person asked me, why in the world did you waste my time interviewing people if you're just going to overrule my input?
Yes.
It's a
Very
valid
good.
question.
Very good. And it is acceptable, I would say, to say, all right, Jen, I want you in the interview process because I want
Right.
your input.
Right.
I may or may not go with your decision, and I still want your input. It
Yeah.
is going to weigh into my decision. Right? That might be one way to go.
Yeah. Agree.
All right, Jen, what is your second suggestion about how to have this no regrets hire?
Yeah. Number 2, I'm calling look back to look forward. And that is simply
Mhm.
checking references. There has been an absolute hiring bonanza happening over the past couple of years, and a lot of hires, there was absolutely no reference checks being done. And I understand that it may not always be easy to get reference information, but I will tell you that if you even just ask in the interview process about referenceability, you will uncover a lot of problems. And so, whether or not you actually even make the reference call at the end of that process, just by simply walking through a person's work history and asking basic questions like, who did you report to? Why exactly did you leave? And what will they say about you when we contact them for a reference?
Mm.
Just the response to those questions is very, very telling. So
Uh,
simple questions, direct questions should produce direct answers. Who did you report to? I reported to Aaron Schmookler. Why did you leave? Well, I moved on to a different opportunity. What will he say about you when we contact for a reference? I think he'd say really great things, right? That's a pretty straightforward response. But when somebody has reference trouble, you will hear indirect answers to those questions. Oh, it's complicated. I think he'd say good things about me. I'm not really sure. Or my favorite, oh, he doesn't give references. You'll never be able to get a hold of him. My
mm.
experience has been that if you've done good work and your manager appreciates the good work that you've done, they'll give you a reference. Regardless of what the company's policy is on references, I can get references.
Yeah. So I love the question, what will they say about you?
It's assumptive, right?
Have you ever had kind of ambiguous, not ambiguous is the wrong word, ambivalent. He'd say that these things were good and maybe he might express these concerns. Have you ever had somebody reply that way?
I
And
have,
how do you
and
take it?
I'm not necessarily concerned about that, right? It's so again to kind of role play that if somebody said, I think on the balance, he would say that I did a great job. Now he's not happy that I left. He wanted me to stay longer, right? Or we didn't see eye to eye on things, and I'll be very candid with you about that. But here's how we navigated it. I think on the balance, he would say that we had a good working relationship. I'm not concerned if the reference isn't perfect per
Yeah.
se. Again, it goes back to the position. I mean, if I'm hiring for an executive level hire, I would expect them to be able to leave a job well. If it's more of an entry level job and the person maybe is still learning some of the rules of working relationships and they say, look, I left with no notice and I really regret it. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that. I may not hold that against them because they're still learning, right? But
Yeah.
they're showing that they're learning. It depends on the level of position, the judgment that I would expect, but yeah, it's all about how they answer that, but you can kind of feel it. You can smell it a mile away if they're trying to obscure. My
Uh-huh.
my my favorite redirect is, oh, you'll never get a hold of him. He doesn't do references. Mm, Let's see.
I mean, I'm thinking about one of my employers, and if you were to call her, I imagine she would say, "I'd hire him again in a minute. He's not the most organized person who's ever worked for me, and absolutely happy we hire him. We'd hire him again."
Yeah. And if I don't need a person who's super organized in that position, that's not going to worry me. And in fact, I
Yeah,
would appreciate the candor and I'd appreciate the self-awareness. I just checked references on an executive level hire that we made. And that he told me like this CEO is impossible to get a hold of, but I'll try to get a hold of him. I finally just texted the CEO, his previous boss, and said,
yeah,
if I don't hear back from you today, I'll assume that you don't want to provide a reference for him. I got a phone call immediately, right?
yeah, right.
So even hard to reach people, when he knew
They
that not
they
getting
can
back
believe.
to me was gonna prevent a good person from getting hired, I got a phone call.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I love that. That also. There's a little bonus for you folks. How to get a hold
Recruiter
of
tricks.
people who
Recruiter
who
tricks.
who
Yep.
may be hard to get a hold of. Okay. My second suggestion about how to secure yourself a no regrets hire: one-on-one interviews only, no groups on either side of the table, no one person interviewing a whole bunch of people, no whole bunch of people interviewing one person. This is a one-on-one conversation. And there are a number of reasons for this. Maybe the most important reason is that if I'm interviewing you, Jen, and you say something that I want to dig in on, I'm interested for whatever reason. I think it's great. It concerns me. Whatever reason it is that I'm having follow-up questions emerge in my mind. If this is a panel interview, I am much less likely to be able to follow that rabbit down the hole and really find out uh, whether that's a concern that I should be concerned about, whether that's a wonderful thing about you that is in fact wonderful, because the mind of the group is much less incisive than the mind of the individual. Groups good for some things, not so great for others.
Again, we agree on this. In fact, it was my next point. My next point was go solo, ditch the panel interview.
All right.
Uh, so we can combine this into
Yeah.
one. Agree. And there's also data that shows that the panelists feel sorry for the interviewee because they feel like they're sort of ganging up on that person.
Yep.
And to your point, they may not be willing to go down that rabbit hole, but they also might ease up a little bit and they
Yes.
might not challenge the interviewee as much. There also ends up being a lot of banter between the interviewers, again, because of the dynamic. They feel bad that we're ganging up on this poor applicant sitting across the table. And so they make lighter conversation and it just takes some of the focus off of the interview. So I agree. I think panel interviews are, again, unless you're hiring for a job where you need a person who can present to a group, right? Maybe that's an actual part of your interview process to see, okay, for this enterprise salesperson who's going to go into boardrooms and present to groups of people, how do they navigate a room full of executive level decision makers? Okay,
In,
cool.
in
That
which
makes
case,
sense. That makes sense.
have them
But
do
that,
it. Have them do
yeah,
a presentation, perhaps.
yeah,
I've had
not,
job
yeah,
interviews
true. Not an interview. Yep.
where I interviewed with one person, and they said, "Great." And now comes the part which we told you about in advance, where we're going to go into the next room, into the boardroom, and you're going to present to this panel.
Right.
Fantastic, right? It gives me, as an interviewer, I go, okay, well, I'm decent at interviewing. I know I can rock this part, right? So it actually bolstered my confidence instead of diminishing it, which interviews for everybody are really stressful. The more people you've got across from you, the more stressful it is. And it's not even really workplace analogous stress. It has no use for you as an interviewer to
No.
increase their stress in that way.
Yeah, it's very true. I would add to that that similar to that not having that dynamic of the panel interview distract. I'm also a big fan of multi-sensory interview. So some
Mm.
interview in person, some on the phone where you cannot see the person. I have found that to be very effective to make, again, going back to defining your process, we'll sometimes pick one person who's going to do just a phone-based interview. I love to do phone-based interviews because I'm old school. I've been doing this for 30 years. And so I didn't always have tools like, we have now to do virtual interviews face to face. And so I have developed a really good skill of listening intently in interviews
Mm,
and hearing what's being said, what's not being said, digging deeper. And I sometimes prefer to take away the visual distraction, so that I can really just listen, and I can also cut out some of the social niceties and pleasantries that can
mm.
sometimes distract from really evaluating the candidate.
Love it. Okay, so between us, somehow we're going to have to come up with a bonus, with a bonus suggestion since we had this overlap, which happens every once in a while. Was that no panel interviews? Was that your third suggestion?
That was my third. Yeah, I said go solo, ditch the panel interview.
All right. Um, so let me see if I can come up with a question that'll elicit another suggestion from you. Um, what what would you say, in your experience, is the most common? This is the reason we shouldn't have hired this person.
Mm. When
We
they look
overlook
back, when they look
we
back, they're
overlook
like,
X.
yeah.
What is the X?
The X is not listening to your gut, which sounds
Mm,
like I'm saying something different than what I said earlier. I said, "Don't over rely on your gut." I will now say the counter to that is don't ignore it either.
mhm.
Because somebody can check all the boxes, look good on paper. You did your reverse engineering process where you've got the outcome in mind and so forth, but something just doesn't sit right with you, right? And you can't put your finger on it. Chase it down. Chase
Uh,
it down. Chase it
yes.
down in a reference, chase it in maybe a follow-up conversation. Don't fully trust your gut because your gut
Yeah.
will lie to you sometimes. Your gut also may be the seat of bias. We all have them. The trick is to recognize them for what they are, look them in the eyes. But don't ignore it.
I
That when I
love
look back on regretful hires I've made, it's like I knew there was something I should have dug into more.
just somehow knew it. And I love that you said chase it down. Not if your
Mhm.
gut doesn't feel right, don't hire them.
Oh, right.
That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
If your gut doesn't feel right, chase it down and resolve it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Um, I think about my time as a theater director, which maybe you knew about, Jen.
Yeah.
Um, the only casting decisions that I ever regretted are the ones where my production team, we'd all be watching the auditions and talking with the actors. The only ones I ever regretted were the ones where I said, I don't think it's that person. And everybody else on the panel said, it's totally that person. And I said, okay, you win. Um,
Majority rules.
and what I should have done was to say, let's bring him in for another audition. Let's
Right.
run him through his paces a little bit, in a different way, because that would have led me to the why do I feel this way? It's not
Yeah.
enough to feel. And that gut feeling is such valuable information about where and whether to keep digging.
Yes.
I love it.
Feelings are real, but they're not always true.
I love it. Okay, so there's Jen's third, fourth really suggestion. My next suggestion for you folks is, don't give people the benefit of the doubt. Right? If you say, okay, we've got this problem, and that's gonna be a problem, or that might lead to regrets. You've got to preference false negatives over false positives. Yes, this is kind of the opposite of that whole innocent until proven guilty thing, that we don't want to put people in jail who don't need to be there or don't deserve to be there. And when it comes to a hire, the damage that the wrong hire can do can be so significant. Even just the fact of hiring somebody and then having to renegotiate that and either move them or let them go, that does damage not only to them, it does damage to your team. If they were the wrong person because of values misalignments or emotional intelligence kinds of things, that can create a lot of damage really fast. And so letting go a couple of people who could have who could have been it is better than bringing in the one person who isn't. What do you think? I thought that might be a little, no.
It depends on the role. It depends
Yeah.
on the role. For certain roles, you've just got to get it right. Leadership roles, roles where they're going to have, a lot of discretion. They're going to have, influence over your strategy, your budget, your customers, et cetera. You really, you want to get it right. There are other roles where maybe you can afford to take more chances, more of those entry level type hires where it's like, we don't know exactly. And it's not, we've got a call center function in our company, and it's not for everybody. And sometimes we don't know until they get into the role whether or not, I mean, we've got a good hiring model. We use all the tools I've talked about. We're willing to take a few more chances there, and because we know the applicant's taking a chance, they probably haven't been, based on the way we hire for this role, they probably haven't been in a role like this before, and so we go into it telling them, let's try it, right? Let's
Right.
try this, and so in the first 30 days, we sit down again and say, how's it going? Are you liking it? Here's how we see,
Yeah.
how it's. So it depends on the role you're hiring for, but yeah, for those roles where you must get it right. I would say, to your point about not giving the benefit of the doubt, again, chase it down, right? If there's
Yeah.
something that is creating doubt, you owe it to yourself, and you also owe it to them to try to resolve it. Because if you hire with some doubt, you sometimes will give that more energy. You're looking for that boogeyman to show up, right?
There's
But
that
it's like,
reticular activating system, right? That when you get a new
exactly.
Ford Escort, or I'm showing my age, right?
That's
When you
smart.
get a Honda
Yeah.
Accord,
Yeah.
every car on the road becomes a Honda Accord.
Yeah.
And when you give somebody the benefit of the doubt, every action becomes evidence for
You're
that
looking
doubt.
for that, right? You're like, I don't know if he really wants, I don't know if he's really going to stay. Okay, well, I keep saying he, like we only hire men. I don't know
Yep.
why I keep saying that, but I don't know if she's really going to stay. Well, let's have the conversation around that. Let's look, how could we chase that down and see, is there a pattern of
Right.
her not staying in jobs? How does she leave jobs? How does she describe why she leaves jobs? Let's just say it out loud. I'm concerned. I don't understand, you know, whatever is creating doubt for you, chase it down.
And skills are buildable, right?
Yeah,
Emotional intelligence, or
that
somebody,
takes a
you really
long
definitely don't
time.
want to hire a jerk.
Yeah, that's not good.
I, okay. Before we hear from you, Jen, about your last suggestion, tell the folks how and why they might want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, if you would like help with hiring, whether it's a full-time role or it's temporary staffing, I would love to talk to you. This is the business that we're in. We work on positions, a lot of work in manufacturing, a lot of work in distribution, work in technology. We have a team that does exclusively professional and technical placement, engineering roles, et cetera, and then a team that does all sorts of all levels of staffing. So if you would like help in any capacity with your hiring process or your staffing needs, I'd be happy to talk. And the easiest way to find me, we're here on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm an avid LinkedIn user and would be happy to connect with you.
All right. And so, Jen, what is your final suggestion?
My final suggestion is I wrote it up as deploy ESP, ask lame questions, get lame answers. So ESP, and I don't mean extrasensory perception. I don't think any of us have the crystal ball for hiring. I don't care how good you are at it. ESP, I mean exactly, specifically, precisely. And
Mm,
that all gets to asking good questions. So we've all been trained that open-ended questions are the holy grail, right? Ask open-ended questions, that gets people talking. Sure. But there's also a time and place for closed-ended questions, not just questions that have a yes or no answer, but a question that has a specific answer. So, for
mm,
example, why did you leave your last position? "Oh, I was looking for a new opportunity." Be more specific. Could you tell me more specifically what you mean by that? Well, once you drill, you get beyond the euphemism. You get beyond the how to interview. The interviewing for dummies handbook on how to answer that question. You start to get to the reality of, well, okay, here's what really happened in the middle. It was a high pressure situation. I lost my temper. Oh, okay. Now that's a very different conversation than I was looking for my next opportunity. So I feel like too many interviewers ask these very softball questions and they get very softball answers. And then they're surprised when the person that they thought they hired isn't the person who shows up for work. And so,
mm.
really, drilling into, asking very specific questions. What were your accomplishments in that role? Great. What specifically did you do? We landed this massive account. Great. What exactly did you do to land that account? Well, when they
Mm.
can't give any details about how they landed the account, you have to wonder if it's really real. So, I think it's a popular phrase now, what is it? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The hiring corollary is
Yeah.
ask lame questions, get lame answers, and make lame hires.
I love that. I think I'm hearing some specific kind of keys that you used, right? You used the question, what was your part in that? What did you do to accomplish that?
Specifically,
Um,
what
yeah.
specifically, precisely what was
Tell me
your
more
part?
about that. Can
Yeah,
you get more specific, please?
yeah. And if
You know
there's
what?
and if there's something there, you'll get an answer. But if it's just a fluffy, interview question or interview response, there's nothing to worry about.
What actions did you take? I
Mhm.
like I like questions that start with, "Tell me a story about."
Yep. And then
All
dig
right.
into their story. Don't get so
Yes.
sucked into the story because
Right.
some people are great storytellers and you miss the fact that there's big holes in the story.
Good. Okay. Before I get into my fourth and final suggestion, which brings us to a total of 8, um, you know, folks come to us. I'm Aaron Schmuckler, CEO, company culture engineer at the Yes Works. And one of our most recent clients came to us because he said, I've got a great team. And I just noticed that over time, we've got a little bit of a trust issue. We've got good trust. We need to have great trust. These gaps in trust are slowing us down. They're interfering with our ability to focus on the work because instead we're focusing on these gaps in trust. So if you've got anything that you might experience as a gap in trust, uh, that very same client told us there was an overnight difference, an immediate change. He said, I was walking on eggshells, and then immediately I started giving people direct feedback that they wanted. And in fact, they were asking for it. So there was a very clear, definitive before and after. If that's a kind of change that you are looking for, then find me. I'm the only Aaron Schmuckler on LinkedIn, and you can find me also at theyesworks.com. All right. My fourth suggestion is to get candidates bragging about the kinds of things that would be culture disqualifiers for you. One of the things that's a culture disqualifier for me, for example, is victim mentality. And so one of the questions that I love as an interview question is, tell me about a time when someone who you were working for, a supervisor, asked you to accomplish something unreasonable, or they asked you to do something they were unreasonable with you, because every single employer in the world is sometimes unreasonable. The answers that I'm looking for are things like, well, I had a candid conversation with him, or I had a candid conversation with her, and I said I'd love to do that, and I've got all of this stuff on my plate. Help me juggle my priorities. That would be one example of an answer that would get me excited about hiring this person. And lots of people who have a victim mentality are going to take this as an excellent opportunity to brag about how unreasonable and how much of a jerk their last supervisor was. And so there are lots of these questions that can help get into these culture disqualifiers, because people will often like to brag, and they will lay it right out for you, the reason that you may not want them on your team.
I love that's I love it. I love it. And I would say be careful about your own biases about companies you don't like. I've seen a lot of poor hires made where that victim mentality, using your example, would be a real turn off to you if you didn't know the company. But they come from your competitor and you really dislike this competitor and they start telling you how unreasonable and
Oh,
how unethical and right all the things and you're like, yeah, I like, you overlook that that personal contribution to the story because you have a bias to dislike the employer. That's one of the big mistakes I see people make, is to assume that just because someone's coming from a competitor that they're going to be a good hire, or if they forgive them for their victim behavior or their lack of personal accountability because they don't hold it against them because they have a bias against that company. The
Right.
reality is we've all worked for companies that weren't great, and who you are at a great company is who you are at a bad company, right?
Indeed.
And yeah, so I really I like that. It's
A and something that you just said, Jen, makes me wanna, also kind of elucidate. I'm not saying that you don't wanna hear a single word of criticism. That a single word of criticism saying something like, "They asked me to do something that I just ethically couldn't allow myself to do."
yeah.
Fine.
How'd you handle it? Yeah.
In fact, that's great. And maybe that is so, that might go right along with, and so why did you leave your last job? Well,
Mhm.
we had a values misalignment. Fine. It's the nursing at that, and
Mhm.
the redoubling in, and the brag, not just naming once and moving on to, okay, here's what I needed to do about it for myself.
Right.
But the bragging about how bad in one way or another they are.
Yeah.
Jen, anything that you'd like to add as a button on our conversation before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just overall, it's a hiring, interviewing, selecting, hiring is a skill.
Mhm.
And there's great resources out there. I have some great friends and colleagues who have made an entire professional career of helping companies hire better, not in the staffing space, but just working directly with internal hiring managers and talent teams to help them really refine the craft of hiring. I think too little attention is given to the actual skill of
Mm.
making good hiring decisions, and it really there's not much that I think that contributes more to a manager's success or lack of success than their ability to get the right people on their team.
That's really right on the money, I think. The interviews are notoriously bad predictors of job performance, in part because they're artificial environments, and in part because it is a skill. It is a skill like any other that gets better with practice,
Yeah,
and it's not a skill that most of us get to practice very often.
true.
All right.
If you're bad at making hires, you'll get to practice it a lot.
You get to practice more.
Hopefully you
Get
learn.
better
Hopefully you learn.
Uh, Great. Well, I think it's important, a little bit to touch on how to avoid that no regrets. We wanted to hire you, and now you're not here. In this job market, folks, you got to be quick. You don't
Mhm.
you
Very
don't
true.
want to be too quick. You don't want to be so quick that you're not doing the investigation justice, and you also don't want to drag it out. Once somebody has met your standard, you're ready to stop looking.
Yeah.
Don't keep looking for somebody who maybe is even more perfect. Set a good standard at the beginning, and when somebody meets it, time to make an offer.
Yeah. We compare it to dating, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how you proposed marriage to your spouse, but you didn't say,
yeah,
"Well, after considering all my options,"
right.
right? No.
Yeah.
You're one.
Uh,
You're the
is
one,
it
right?
possible there's somebody else better out there for me?
Right. And I need a little more time. Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah, move
Jen,
quickly.
this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much
It's
for
always fun.
sharing your wisdom with me and with the other folks. I know I learned a lot, even right there in the first minutes, and then through our conversation. Thank you.
Always fun. Thanks, Aaron.
All right.